Hello everyone, welcome to today's EMPA May 2023 webinar. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and country and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, their elders past, present and future. I'm joining you today from the lands of the Jagera and Turrbal from Brisbane. My name is Barbara Ryan and I'm the chair of EMPA. On behalf of EMPA, I welcome everyone here today. So if you haven't attended one of our webinars previously or you don't have much experience using Zoom, just hover your cursor over the screen and you should be able to get a panel that has all of the icons that you will need to use. There's one there for a chat, so jump on the chat panel anytime to talk to your fellow participants. Just make sure you've got chat with everyone activated at the top of your chat window so that everyone will see your comment. And we'll also be using the Q&A icon, so click on that to enter any questions you have. I'll ask those of our panelists and we should be able to have a really great conversation. If you have any issues or questions and can't access the chat, just send them by email to events@hpe.com.au. So today we're going to return to the principle number 6. You'll remember a couple of months ago we looked at the media side of this principle. Today we're going to be looking at social media. So principle number 6 is working with media and social media providers, liaison to collaboration. Our panel today are Belinda Young and Ben O'Sullivan. Belinda Young is a PhD candidate at the University of Melbourne, and she's also president of Mums of the Hills, a community group that she founded in 2015. Belinda's research focuses on whether online groups can promote place-based action in the prevention of human-caused bushfire ignitions. Mums of the Hills is predominantly an online group of 5,700 members, and it's in the Yarra Ranges, an area in Melbourne's east known for its beauty and vulnerability to disasters. It's unique in that it has successfully created a strong online and place-based community connection and built the social capital in the community and provided clear communication and support following disasters. Belinda was recognised for this work by recently being awarded the 2023 Victorian Australian of the Year Local Hero Award. We're also joined by Ben O'Sullivan from Meta. Ben O'Sullivan is a partner manager for government and social impact partners across New Zealand and the Pacific Islands. He has been at Meta for 7 years, a time when Meta had only 2 ad placements and were yet to have advertising on Instagram. Originally hailing from Wanganui, Ben started his career as a media planner in Auckland and has since worked in London, Dublin and now Sydney, serving partners large and small. He is a lifelong New Zealand Warriors supporter and has forcibly passed this down this honour to his 2-year-old son, Oscar. Welcome, Ben and Belinda. So let's get started. You'll both have seen a lot of growth in your particular areas in terms of use of social media in disasters, both on behalf of agencies and community. Can we have a talk about where you might be able to see this going? So Ben, we'll start with you.
Excuse me. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So as Barb said in the introduction, I've been at Facebook, or well, Meta now for over 7 years, and the platform and the tools that we're offering as part of this platform has really proliferated, and it has made, and this is where I had a lot of sympathy for partners who are on a platform, because we're not the only platform you're using at this stage, but navigating our tools and solutions has become somewhat more complex, albeit the evolution of our tools and systems have been made to meet the unique trends and consumer desires, i.e. the rise of groups, the rise of reels, short form video, the rise of ephemeral storytelling through stories. So I think, informing yourself on all these tools and solutions, navigating them, and playing to each of the services' strengths as a means of not only building your own community, but participating in the many active communities that exist on our platforms today, is what I think is what the best partners are having success in our platform by doing.
Belinda, what's your perspective?
Well, as an end user and administrating a large group through disasters, I've been able to see how they react. They're a highly reactionary platform to use. A lot of people, when they have something go wrong, then they will put it on social media and something gets done. What I would like to see in disasters is to actually take a step back. I would like to see social media being used in a preventative form. And certainly that comes down to my research. I think that at the moment we are just reacting to problems, and we're putting out the fire, so to speak. But if we can use social media in a way to basically help with changing the conversation, increasing the conversation, to provide a preventative way of dealing with disasters. And that doesn't just count bushfires, it covers everything. It doesn't have to be purely environmental, it can be anything.
So, Belinda, you think we're not doing that well at the moment?
No.
So where do you think we can improve that? How can we do that?
I think there are a number of things happening. So at the moment, and I with the deepest of respect for all our agencies, I do still feel that the agencies are there to put out a fire. They are there to be the hero and save the day. And so all the effort of preventing that disaster actually prevents them from being that hero. And so there isn't a lot of conversations about agencies in a community sense. The discussion isn't at a community level, because at the end of the day, it's the community that will help prevent many things from escalating or starting. But there isn't a community level interaction as yet on that preventative space. That's where I see that agencies can be better involved with the community and better involved in the preventative area.
Yeah, okay. And so from the meta perspective, Ben, can you see ways for us to do this better?
And I have to back up Belinda's point, and I think sometimes it's perhaps a luxury being able to have the time and the resource to put effort into preparedness messaging, but it is when we audit government NGO campaigns, a lot of it is that point, the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff scenario. So there is massive opportunity to connect, build communities, participate in communities in advance of disasters happening, to aid in preparedness. A lot of this can be done organically through an organic strategy, and this I refer to as non-paid. What is your role in groups? Do I participate in existing groups? Do I need to create is there a unique need for our own group? Can I wrap it around an actual campaign? And I grew up in New Zealand, and we had a lot of earthquake awareness campaigns. I don't know if they do it so much now, but can we wrap it up in memorable, distinctive campaigns that not only just have a hashtag that goes along with it, but something that can be built consistently over time, consistently over years, use very distinctive assets, be that audio cues, visual cues, that we can leverage when it does come to a time of crisis to say, stop, drop, roll, just for example. you know? So I think there is perhaps a gap in that preparedness work and how it plays out on our platform, because when that crisis does hit, you want to be able to just leverage any of that work that you've done beforehand through building, say, those visual cues, audio cues, other things to help you switch on a campaign immediately.
Yeah. So, Ben, there has been a bit of research. We've got some researchers, probably some of them online, who've done some research about the impact of visuals in cutting through. But what else have you seen that cuts through? Because that's the thing about preparedness. It's unless it's relevant and salient, it doesn't. You know, it depends on a person's time of life and their own situation, whether or not those messages actually connect and then they engage more. So what have you seen works in terms of the engagement?
Yeah, so there's a few things here. One of them is you can't treat Meta as a bulletin board. And that's what a lot of partners, and I work for a lot of elections, and a lot of political candidates fall into this trap of treating both Facebook and Instagram as a bulletin board, and I build my community. And it's that shift in perception of this is a social platform at its heart, and it's an unbelievably powerful social platform when played to its strengths. So things like interactive content, original and authentic content, timely content, that's something which I think, you know, disaster agencies are probably doing naturally quite well. You know, the last one is consistent content. So it's just like, how can I have that visual consistency, message consistency, so that when I mentioned it before, when the disaster does happen, it's like flicking on a switch that you can leverage. So I ask this in election training all the time. It's like, how often do you go into your communities groups? How often do you go into your constituents' comments, reply to their comments, participate in the community, as opposed to expecting the community to grow around you? I think, I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole of visual and audio cues and whatnot. That starts to get into a little bit of marketing and branding, but I think that's equally important. But the main thing is like, be a participant in the community. Don't expect the community to come to you.
I'd like to go back to that point of consistency. So, Belinda, how do you handle that in terms of your own consistency? Because you're you know, one person. Do you have an admin group? And also, how do you handle the consistency of messaging coming through from agencies?
So yes, I do have admins. We have, so our main group has got 6,000 members, but we also have 11 subgroups as well. So it's actually a massive web, and all have their individual admins for all of those. So the consistency, yes, we use scheduling a lot. So it's consistently at the same time every week. So people, and they are the basic stuff. And that is things that people know that they're coming up. And it's a community group. So it is vastly different to an agency. But we actually don't, I completely agree with you, Ben. We don't use it as a bulletin board. Occasionally, we will have to do an update, and we actually step out. We do a myriad of things, not just Facebook and Instagram, but we also use our website and newsletter. So it's emailed as well to try and grab it, because algorithms are a bit of a challenge for us. But what we find is the most powerful use of the platform is goodwill. People actually, when I know that we've tried to reduce it, the likes and the positivity, the feeding of those likes and reactions, but actually, if you show and celebrate someone's doing something good, and in this case, if you celebrate somebody, you know, preparing, or you're having a race to see how much debris you have a challenge to see how much debris you can get into your green waste bin, or you know, who else is doing, they're clearing their gutters
And then all the I am, aren't you awesome? You're awesome. No, you are. And that goodwill is, it is completely organic. It is genuine. It is not, it's not forcing it down people's throats, because they will not respond to it. They do whatever they want to do. But if they see the thing that works for our group so well is that I know that maybe we get, we're only 6,000. We get between 57 and 62,000 comments and reactions every month. So it's a highly active group. But I also know the number of people that are watching and reading and searching. They're the people that I'm actually connecting with, because they're not responding. They're not asking the questions, but they are still learning. And if they're seeing that the social norm in the community is this, to do this thing, then that is more likely to encourage action. And so that's why preparedness is one thing, but in our case also prevention is far better than waiting for the disaster to happen. So that's how we use the platform. We know that it's going to come forward. So we know that bushfire season is coming ahead. So we are talking about seeing how much we can get into that green bin, where those basic things like that.
So, Belinda, how do you negotiate or navigate the fine line between information delivery and providing value?
So we have to be very, very tricky about it. Now, we have, as you said, we have the Dandenong Ranges in Wurundjeri country. We actually avoided most of the bushfires. We lost a house close by that 21 trucks attended to prevent it going through the bushfires. However, the group was basically walking on eggshells while we waited for us. We thought we'd be the next people. However, in 2021, we were devastated by a massive storm where we had 25,000 trees fall in one night, and it absolutely flattened us. So that was in the middle of the COVID lockdowns. So no one wants to talk about disasters. You do not mention the D word or trauma. Don't mention D, don't mention T, and then you'll get people to maybe listen in. So the moment you can feed that in slowly or have a separate conversation, it will eventually come up. People will talk about it, but you just don't have them believe that this conversation is about disaster until they're ready to talk about it. Shoving it down their throat again, you will have them turning away immediately. There's just too much trauma, too many disasters going on in the world for anyone to be ready to go in and head on and discuss it.
So, Ben, do you have any examples of perhaps people that do that, navigate that line really well, that sort of providing value, but at the same time providing valuable information that maybe people aren't quite receptive to?
Look, I have to caveat that I'm by no means and far from an expert in disaster communication. My expertise does lie in the use of our platform and tools, but over time I have come to work in partnership with many government disaster recovery agencies, and perhaps I'm showing a bias here, but I think that the Unite Against COVID campaign was a remarkable example in disaster communication, with the balance of a really expert balance of the soft communication and the very rational, informative communication in a very clear and concise way. And you only have to scroll through their Facebook page or their Instagram profile just to see the tone of voice was very, very consistent throughout. But there was a neat divide in the kind of a very distinct divide in the soft, more emotional communication. That is the celebration of the communities who are rounding up, building each other up, stories from celebrities and whatnot, versus that very rational messaging of wash your hands, don't go out after here, wear a mask on that. So I think that was it was an expert example in navigating that fine line, because you do need, I think you do, you know, and it was really interesting to hear your point, Belinda, there is, you know, people don't want, and it makes absolute sense. So it makes it even more important to, like, how do we communicate the real rational important messages without forcing it down their throats, of course, of saying, here's a disaster, do this sort of thing. Perhaps I'm showing a little bit of bias, but I think that's a really good example. And look at, I asked you just to look at the visual consistency that came throughout that campaign. There's a story that one of the newspapers used the wrong color tone of yellow, and they called them up to get them to swap to the softer yellow, which is the very, very deliberate use of that visual consistency, so that anytime you saw a message from them, every time you saw that specific color tone of yellow, you would know it was a message, an authoritative message from the government saying what you should do.
Okay, we've got a question from Scott Walker here. For you, Ben, does Meta proactively monitor, facilitate and participate in an online community group in an emergency? An example that he's provided is to avoid another horrific live stream event at like for instance at Christchurch, or to assist emergency services with accurate intelligence.
Yeah, so can you repeat the first part of that question again? Do we actively participate
in online community groups in an emergency?
Not as an entity in ourselves, and that we're Meta in those community groups, or I'm Ben O'Sullivan from Meta. We're not participating like that, but we have many lines of communication open with, in particular, the Christchurch call, which is now gathering more steam on the back of Jacinda Ardern's retirement from politics and leading that now. We have many different work streams open, and a lot of work that we're doing to prevent that happening again. And a lot of it's actually already come to fruition, fortunately, now. And a lot of that is through AI enhancement, which you've probably heard a lot of everyone talk about over the past 6 months. But also we've done a lot, especially locally, in the area of misinformation, because we know that as a crisis hits, unfortunately, that there are bad actors out there who will look to seed both misinformation and disinformation, which is why we've partnered with 3 different independent fact checkers in Australia that will monitor content, but also will take in content that you can send them, where we then, if they tell us, we'll then enforce upon it in various different ways. So there's many different lines of communication open there, and you know, we're not completed on that. They are always going to be works in progress.
Yeah. Okay, Ben, how at what point does an emergency come onto your radar, and is it algorithms that helps you with that? So for instance, if there's a big earthquake or a fire that's starting to get you know, beyond the local capacity, when does that come onto your radar, and sort of then how do you interact with information coming from that, and what are you looking for?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we have specific products around crisis response. One being a kind of crisis hub, which there's a number of different signals that we take in that will qualify a crisis as needing this level of resource and support from our perspective. And I don't actually have the signals myself. But we can safely assume it's on volume of impact and severity of impact. And when that's I don't want to say unlocked, it sounds like a game, but when we reach that threshold, there's a number of different products that they can access, buy and sell, forums. We make sure we're very intentional on surfacing authoritative voices, be that local, state or federal or NGO voices in that area, to ensure that where our communities are fully informed by those authoritative sources. But also, locally, I think that's a kind of global program that we have around the crisis hubs. Locally, we are much more nimble in the way that we can lean in and help and support. We've done this, for example, through ad credit support for and donations during the Hawke's Bay cyclone that happened recently. So we've worked with the government as well as Red Cross to help roll that out. But we also ran a training session for all community moderators who are working in response to that around safety, security, privacy, and moderation on our platform. So there's not just there's a lot of different levers that we can pull locally, and that's something that I and my colleagues are happy to lead and happy to work with yourself, Barbara, if there's a forum to run those sort of training sessions in as well.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the triggers for those flags? Is it engagement in a geographical area, or are you looking also at offline mainstream media? What sorts of things will inform that?
I'll be brutally honest with you. I have no idea. It's a slightly guarded it's a slightly guarded one, and often we guard these because we don't want people to manipulate. Bad actors to manipulate, to potentially trick the system into thinking there's a crisis when there's not, because that would be a disaster for ourselves and for everyone else if it was manipulated. Hence why it is quite a guarded topic in terms of what signals inform it. But it is generally the potential for lives lost, affected, and then there will be a call whether to kind of turn that switch on and open it up, and also the impact that this could have for a community in terms of the recovery. So livelihoods lost, not just lives, and this is where we do see a lot of the buy and sell forums popping up there, people offering help. So yeah, that's as much as I know. I'm afraid they keep that secret from us.
Belinda, you've got something to add?
Yes, I was going to say, I suppose there's also things that our community does as well. I'm not sure whether others do, but from our own experience, we learned, I'll just lower my hand here, what we learned from our disaster was that immediate chaos where councils, agencies were unable to get a consistent message across, not just in the private groups specifically. So we have groups, the buy swap groups that are up to 41,000, 50,000 people in one group. And the miscommunication and arguments that were going on in those groups, it was quite frustrating for all of the agencies and council who were restricted in the way they use social media themselves. So what I set up is for all the largest community groups in the area, and we're talking probably in a 50,000 square area, is a massive area, but those main admins from each of those groups, we'd actually formed a sleeper group, and they're all, it doesn't do anything, we don't actually use it. However, when we know personally when we're going to get a storm or potentially going to get a storm, or the bushfire season and there are particularly bad days, we will wake up that group. We will let the council know, the local CFA knows that this group is there. That we all have the firm understanding that we are not being used in a disaster, but certainly post. We are there for the recovery phase and providing relief information of where to go. And so it makes it a lot easier for agencies to get a consistent message across all private groups. The council can also feed it through the admins and transfer it through. But not only that, we found that the whole area was crawling with reporters. The news, the media were everywhere, and they were quite traumatizing a lot of people. And so we found that having that admin group, it meant that the media could come to us, and then we were quite selective about who would be prepared to speak to people, be quite specific about, you know, we were finding that people were getting their smashed houses being shown on television without their permission. So we were trying to control and be as respectful for our community as at the same time. So maybe, Ben, I don't know whether other large communities, on the ground communities, have collaborated to create these sort of macro admin groups that can be activated. But I thought that might be something that Meta might know about.
I don't think there's anyone, doesn't sound like there's anyone as well organized as yourself and the community. That's a really good example of you know, preparedness yourself, and then being able to flick on a switch when push comes to shove. So to be honest, there isn't many more examples beyond that.
The community engagement tragics in the audience are drooling over this community-led example of disaster response and management. So, Belinda, I was just interested in the trigger for standing up that sort of dark site that you have set up.
Well, that was a pure frustration of seeing what was going on. And so we had multiple layers of troubles here in the hills. Our telecommunications are abysmal. And so what that meant is that for up to 5 days, we had no mobile access. Between June 21 and June 22, I was without NBN for 123 days. So access to what you need for social media is pretty difficult to get. And then of course we had 70 days without power. So when you're trying to find information in an area where I know that there was one spot right beside the CFA who gets 2 bars. So and everyone was taking turns to step on that little square concrete box. So it was that intense, until there was a muster truck turned up in a relief centre further up the mountain once you cut yourself through the trees. It was pretty intense. But that frustration, firstly, of having limited battery life, limited access to the internet, but still having the siloed information that each agency was, whether it was an NGO or a council, had their information separate. And then, of course, there was that organic community reaction where local businesses were offering free food or hot showers, those things that the NGOs had no idea about and were too scared, of course, to say that that's happening just in case it didn't happen. Totally get that. That was a risk that a community member could do because you knew them personally. So the reason that I just got frustrated, and I sort of looked around, I noticed that nobody was actually putting everything together. So that was the start of it, putting all that information together. And for that one, I think we had an incredible amount of people sharing that. That was taken up by the age. It was shared. It just sort of blew out because the information was consolidated of what to do and how you can help in a concise way. From there, I realized actually we need to get that in. We need to go one step further and need to set up this group, because it was just frustrating to see so much misinformation in the groups.
And so how many times have you activated since then, and how have you, what's the threshold for the activation?
So there are, for bushfire, I use the 30-30-30 rule. So if the wind is above, if it's intended, and a lot of the agricultural websites give you a 1 week heads up before the CFA. So the 30-30-30 rule is if the wind's going to be above 30, if the temperature is going to be above 30, if the humidity is going to be below 30, you do not want to be anywhere near this mountain. And so that's where I will give the heads up that we've got a week ahead, just to let you know we're not doing anything, but just saying hi to each other, seeing how you're going, and then we let it quiet. And if nothing happens, we say, thanks for your time. we'll shut this down again, and let's hope that it's a while until the next time. In our groups, we start talking about where, looking forward to it. Actually, a great opportunity to go to the Melbourne Museum. What are those fantastic, or what about that water park? I know the best ice cream joint, or I know, and actually making it a positive experience, because that will encourage people to do something off the mountain. And of course, our group, we're also place-based. So we are working with community houses off the mountain to encourage really fun days off the mountain for free in these community houses. So we're doing a multiple of things, sort of that threshold for bushfires. For wind, we are very, very lucky that we have a local member of the Bureau of Meteorology who actually gives us a heads up about 3 days ahead. So, okay, the winds are coming from the north. We've got the good winds for the north, like Belinda. But our winds, our trees get knocked on the back of the head with a southeasterly or a southwesterly. We have to be really mindful of that. So generally, from about anything over 100 Ks, if we're warned of that, that's when we start considering. 90, we're getting a little bit twitchy, but it's not, we know that that's not going to probably trigger a widespread event, but anything over that 100 for a prolonged period of time, that's when we'll activate that group again.
When we have a look at.
Ben, are there meta tools that we're not using well or to their potential?
Perhaps, very likely, because we're experimenting and introducing tools often, and myself, it's hard to keep on top of them all as well, to be honest. So look, it sounds like a lot of the members on this call will be active participants in both a page level as well as a community group level as well. But there's a shopping list of tools that we're now offering partners to help with comment moderation in particular. Look, we know that we have zero tolerance to community guideline offences on our platform. Zero tolerance doesn't mean zero occurrence. So we're trying to make it easier for the community to report this content and then do our best to review that content as quickly as possible. But we also know that there is perhaps illegal content which you should be surfacing right to the right local authorities. We have community guidelines, which is content against our guidelines. There's also content which is not in either of those buckets, but you don't want that in the platform. And I know, or in your groups or pages. And I think there was, in part of that principle 6, there was a line of, we want to manage an open community conversation here without, I'm not sure what the right word was, but without, kicking people off the platform or whatever. But there are bad actors there that you want to moderate. And like a lot of the bad actors will surface from fake profiles, for example. So there's tools like Moderation Assist, which you can turn on. And what that does is that automatically hides comments that come from people with no friends, if they have no profile picture, if the profile has been started in the last 10 days, for example. There's different signals that we can take at a profile level, as well as the content that they're posting as well. If they're posting links to a specific domain that you don't want to belong in your community, you can then hide them as well. They don't know it's hidden. They see it, so it's not going to provoke them into responding more. But that Moderation Assist is a great tool. There's the equivalent in the group setting, which is called Admin Assist, that allows you to moderate in a very similar manner as well. Instagram has their own tools that in particular that will limit, I think it's called Instagram limits. I need to refresh my memory here. But in the times of a crisis, you might expect an influx of new followers and then a lot of comments as well. Limits is a variety of different features that will allow you to mitigate the potential harm that comes from that sudden influx of messages and whatnot. So there's just a sample of tools, and I'm happy to send you a PDF of the various ones that we have, Barbara, that you can then send out to the people on the call today.
Oh, that would be great. Thanks, Ben. Bad actors, Belinda. Is that what you were going to talk about?
Well, I was going to say the admin assist is a really difficult, challenging thing for us. And it's one of the reasons why, I mean, one of the main reasons we set up our website and transferred all of our resources off Facebook. So they are held online for the whole community, of course, not just for Facebook users. They're useful for everyone, but we were incredibly concerned of being shut down. Sometimes the admin assist gets it wrong, and it's incredibly difficult to get it changed. For example, we had a warning that the group could potentially be shut down because of a fairly harmless post where a mum said, "I'm sorry, can someone identify this spider? Don't worry, my husband took it out and killed it." And that kill, I think, maybe had triggered an algorithm that said we were inciting violence. Of course, we are a mother's group, so a lot of mums are trying to sell their breast pumps, their breast milk pumps. No one can sell their breast milk pumps, so they have to get a little creative in their imagery and their description to try and get around that, because we know what we're trying to do. So we are, because of that admin assist, we've had a lot of concerns that our group will suddenly be taken down. Now, for an area that is topographically difficult to get around in, we are rather isolated. And for mums that really, we're isolated immediately after childbirth often. So to lose an online platform, we've saved lives with this platform. I have called 000 for people experiencing domestic violence. I have helped people in psychotic episodes. I've helped people that have had suicidal thoughts. This cannot be shut down, and it's such a dangerous thing for us, and we're really scared. And that admin assist really heightens our level of risk, and so we're doing everything we can to mitigate it. So I think there's some improvements that need to be done on that admin assist, at least in the timeliness and the timeliness of looking at those things.
Yeah, look, I'm happy. I think this is something that we can easily discuss offline, because we'd have to get into the nuances of how these were triggered. It does rely on automation. That's the premise of the tool, and it's perhaps as I say, like zero tolerance doesn't equal zero occurrence when we're relying on rule-based automation. And we are looking, I think you'll see that, you know, the computing power that we're putting now into artificial intelligence, we're really hopeful that that's going to be able to differentiate the nuance between breast pumps and something else that we probably don't want to see in our communities. And it's a real fine line for AI. We are hoping
they're having fun with it, though.
I can imagine.
Tropical beaches and
imagine, because it's one of those ones where you do see bad actors looking to exploit that the more they can. So it's just such a fine line. But I'm absolutely positively confident that with the investments that we're making into AI, which really underpin the foundation of all the automation tools that we have on our platform, from picking up hate speech in groups, from picking up the difference between pornography and breastfeeding, which is something that we allow on our platform. You know, we made concessions to that some time ago, but we're very optimistic that AI will be able to nuance these far better in the near future. But happy to pick up the specifics on that, because we don't want these groups to go either. Like absolutely not. When you talk about the impact that they're having on yourself and the community, that's the last thing we want. And I think if you are a group that is working with on behalf of an NGO or something, there is that Metis Pro support team that I can do a little plug for perhaps at the end with some more information on it. But then again, that's a support channel that we offer any NGO government partner, and you'll be able to get very good service through that on a variety of different operational technical issues. Excuse me.
Belinda, I wanted to go back to that bad actor idea. Have you seen that occur in your group, and how did you all deal with that, or was it self-correcting?
Well, we had lots of fun. So I suppose where we first started seeing these, we thought, wow, we're so popular, we're now getting bad actors. This is fantastic. So back in 2020, when the lockdown started, we had a fantastic author, writer who was a former political advisor in Canberra, who came on and started writing posts every day about the media and making sure that it was consolidated and made sure that it was coming from normal, respected sources, so that people felt confident that they were getting the right amount of information, they weren't getting overly stressed, and they weren't, being fed misinformation. We actually took that out of our private group and deliberately put it on our public group. So that prevented a lot of people trying to enter the group, because the source of the information they were trying to get was no longer private. So we kept that separate and it made that accessible to everyone. As it got more popular, then we got some really interesting characters that came on. So that was, and yes, that was us simply just managing, recognizing when a trial was just an automated system, and just not even, and making sure that anybody, if we saw somebody trying to interact with that person, just messaging them quietly and say, look, this is not a real person, this is a bot, ignore it and it will go away. And we just hide that and move on. So in the group itself, again, we are a community group, and we have a lot of admins that go out of their way to contact each person individually. We have specific questions that are, people think, well, that's a real weird question, but it actually breaks it down and prevents people from thinking they can get in the group easily. So for us, we ask a question about, what is the name of your maternal child health nurse? And like, and we know them. We know them in the area. We have chats with them. And so they'll either leave it and they won't answer the rest of the questions and they'll disappear. Or they'll try and put the same question. And you can tell when someone's in there purely to troll, or more purely as a not correct purposes. You can smell them in a minute. So that's how we prevent them coming into the area. Of course, we have our community. There are members in our community with some fairly extreme opinions on some very difficult topics. And that is where we're really trying to find a balance at the moment, because at the end of the day, we have to all live together. We all have to use and work together in a community despite our differences. And that is our big challenge at the moment. We strongly try and prevent any curation of comments. We have a strong process of, you must, if you have an opinion, no matter what it is, it must be respectful. It must be at the answering the question, not directed at the person themselves, sort of trying to dehumanize a bit and just sort of pull it apart. But of course, it's not always perfect, and some things get so passionate and so heated that we do have to step in. But they're the processes that we put in place to try and keep it as local community-based as possible.
Okay, have we got any questions from the audience?
I noticed there was one for me. There was a question about if I had achieved the problem with the internet.
Like an A5 or an A4 little
Yes.
So
Heather Ann's asking about finding a way to break through the loss of mobile radio and internet that occurs. And that's a big, and the Hawke's Bay cyclone was a huge example of what happens when a connection is lost. So yeah, maybe we talk about that.
Well, we immediately, not just us, but the council as well, realised that was an incredibly difficult situation to be in, because half of the council were stuck in the same disaster. So they weren't able to get back to their desks and help. And for myself, thankfully, we hadn't, it wasn't perfect, but I was right stuck in the middle of it. But some of our other admins, they weren't as effective, and they did have internet. And so I have put in place since then admins in off the mountain, in our more suburban areas, that know that should there be an incident on the mountain, that actually they take control. So they're less likely to be affected by that internet. So we're trying to mitigate it. I mean, once we get into a position we're just about in the next 2 weeks opening our own place-based hub. So we're quite different to most Facebook groups, that we are literally online and place-based. And we are hoping to get a satellite, so satellite phones as well, and that can help alleviate that. There's a whole different level of logistics and concern and risks there. But for the time being, the easy answer is we've made sure that our admins are spread across. There is even one overseas, just to make sure that they aren't affected by the same disasters as we are.
Ben, I'd like to I'd like to go to you now. Is there anything that happens in Meta when you realise that your platform doesn't have access into an area that currently was hoping to rely on it?
We, as a platform, are largely subject to network capabilities. I know there are other tech providers who are doing a lot of work in this area, and who have been really helpful in this area, and our collaboration with them. I'm not sure how that works, but I'm sure there's something going there. But yeah, we are largely subject to the network connectivity in and around the area. But we are aware. We do get signal on that loss. We obviously have pretty good signal on where connectivity is and not, and I think we have worked in the past with local authorities on that as well. But there are, I mentioned before, I know the other major tech platforms, that's more their area around that.
Okay, a couple of questions for Belinda. So Mel Taylor's asking if your online community building leads to in-person community building, sort of taking it offline, and if you can give some examples.
100%, 100%. I think that's where we're quite different from other community online groups, in that the intention, the end goal for this community online group was always the place-based. We weren't, the online group was never the end goal. So we are funded through grant funding mainly to do a lot of online and place-based events. We run chainsaw courses. We're just about to run first aid courses. We do mums groups, all aimed to build skills in the community, but also build connections. As I said, becoming a mum sometimes puts you into a whole different space and different people, and finding those new connections is really important. We have a business Mums of the Hills, so there's a lot of businesses networking together to try and make sure, and that is a place-based thing. We actually have people come together to meet and discuss their issues with their businesses and with life as a mum, as a business owner. We do a lot of social things as well, between having a book clubs. Again, they meet in person. So we are very much, we actually find that having a strong place-based connection and making people aware that you will see the people online in your community. So don't say anything bad online, because it'll get back to someone. That strong connection, and making sure people are reminded through these events that it actually helps with the culture of support, non-judgment and respect. in our online community.
And the next question is about linking with similar organisations in other parts of Victoria. I think for that one, Emma, what we might do is get you to email events@hpe.com.au and we'll put you directly in touch with Belinda. I just wanted to probably end on the question of how you think agencies can improve the effectiveness of their use of Facebook. So let's go to you first, Ben.
I'll go back to my first point in that moderating and working on our platforms 5 years ago probably was an incredibly simple job when you look back at it. But the platforms now, you know, Instagram is nearly more used than Facebook in Australia. It's we are growing as a platform in reach and time spent. However, less people are spending time in feed. More people are going to groups. They're going to Messenger. They're going to Instagram. They're going to stories. They're going to Reels. So there's so many more touch points to, I'm not saying build, but participate in communities proactively than what you had done previously. And when you rely on just one touch point and benchmark against that touch point, you're going to limit yourself significantly. And this is where I have a lot of sympathy for because partners who are navigating a platform, again, it's not the only platform you're working on. But I think building a really proactive content plan that taps into these different touch points will be, I think, the best piece of advice that I can give everyone on this call. And what that content plan will be very unique for each partner, but it needs to be very deliberate, thoughtful, and play to the strengths of each placement, platform, and format, from groups to Messenger to Reels to feed. It needs to be very deliberate and proactively planned to get the best out of that platform.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, Belinda, what are your recommendations?
Well, I think from a volunteer perspective, and as at a community level, it's interesting that those people that are listened to the most are those that are probably most active in their community, but active online as well. So on an online position, if you are seen as somebody that does a lot in the community, you have a lot of respect, and those people that have the respect in those community groups are going to be listened to. They are going to watch what they are doing. And so you really need to look at your volunteers to see, you need to check that they're okay with it. But if they are doing something in terms of preparedness, are they prepared to show that they're doing something in the preparedness space? So they are soft, using them in a soft sense, that they are trying to, without telling people what to do, this is how we are, this is how we're doing it, and this is what I do in the community, and without saying it, you should follow and do the right thing as well. So if you're wanting to use volunteers or ask volunteers to be involved in a way that they feel comfortable with, without running the risk of overstepping the line with agency messaging, then that's probably the way to go about it.
Okay, thank you so much, Ben and Belinda. Some really great insights from two completely different areas of the same tool. So it was a really great session. Thank you. As always, the recording will be made available to everyone via our website. And that'll happen in the next few days, and we're only a week out from the conference in Brisbane, so we hope that we can see most of you there. The next webinar will be at the end of June. We don't have a topic for that set yet. If you have some ideas of what you'd like to hear, let us know. And thanks again, everyone. Really appreciate your time, Belinda and Ben. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
and